Hi, I'm Jason Willoughby with Reach the City Ministries. Thank you for coming back for one more installment of Help for Addiction. We're going to look at today the master addiction behind all others. Doing that is giving some specific training out of the riches of what Christ has given me in my total brokenness and my total need for help. And so I want you to hear, first of all, it takes one to know one. So that's me. And how do you think I know all this? Because I've needed to learn this. So you're in great company. My friends who are struggling with porn addiction, gaming addiction, substance addiction, whatever it is that's got you by the throat, choking you, there is hope, there is a solution, there is a path forward. And I'm delighted to give it to you. We're going to be looking at today the master addiction, the master thing driving all these surface substance and other kinds of addictions. So, do you know what that is? Stay tuned and find out. One of the reasons why the 12 steps, which were pretty much stolen from the Bible, they're basically the disciplines of living a life in Jesus and walking in freedom and forward progress when there's something in you that wants to drag you down all the time. And so these disciplines are really addressing, especially the first three, a hidden and powerful thing behind our porn, our substance, our gaming, whatever it is that we see on the surface that's so obvious, there's something subtle behind that that really needs attention first. So again, expect the unexpected. So we're going to look at what that thing is. The master addiction behind every other addiction is an addiction to control, a control idol, idolatrous love and thirst for control. And addictions are like the scaffolding on a rickety building. Addictions are the things we use and rely on to maintain the false veneer of control that's deep within us. Obviously, that control thing is part of that fallenness, wanting to be like God, wanting to be in charge over everything, our will being done. There's that thing inside you, that super toxic fallen sin nature, that monster inside that loves control, is a fanatic about controlling. And so we are going to have to address the control behind these other addictions if we're going to have any hope of a breakthrough and staying clean and sober, not relapsing. So we're going to dig in a little bit more. Two things will help flesh out this need for our passion for the illusion of control to be broken. And the first is hitting bottom and admitting powerlessness. In the 12 steps, you basically admit to yourself, God, and one other person that you are out of control and can't stop, that you're a slave of your addiction. This thing has beaten you, and you will never be able to self-conquer, self-fix yourself, self-master this. It has you by the throat, and you are in desperate need of an outside intervention, of a love far higher and more powerful than anything you could ever produce. So recognizing, admitting our powerlessness, it goes right to that control thing, that thirst and toxic idol of control. Are you ready to admit that you have come to the end of yourself and you are a slave and you are powerless? Are you able to honestly go there? Or are you going to keep cycling around this attempt to control and fail, controlling and failing, controlling and failing, controlling and failing? Would you like to get off the merry-go-round? Are you ready to admit defeat? Paul in Romans 7 talks about being under the law and sin going berserk, and the harder he tried to obey the law, the more this thing inside of him went berserko and produced even more sin. It went crazy. He talks about coveting, The harder he tried, the worse he behaved, the worse he lived. And so we're facing this wretched man that I am. Who will deliver me from the body of this death? That's Paul's hitting bottom statement. And so I want you to know this is found in Romans 7, one of my favorite little passages on this looking deeply at addiction, admitting powerlessness, and crying out for deliverance. One of the most difficult things to do in life is to give up the fantasy of ever regaining control, of ever self conquering our problem, of ever mastering and saying, permanent victory has been achieved. Now I can live and act like everyone else, and I can live like I don't have a problem. There's something in us that fantasizes about regaining control, climbing back up to the good status when we feel ashamed and dirty and enslaved in our addictions. My friends, that has to die. It's an ugly death. And what that really means is I embrace my status as a perpetually weak person. I will live my days on earth knowing that I am weak in that area, and therefore I have to live that life of care and walking with a limp and being weak. You see, if we can make peace with our permanent weakness, then we're ready to live a life of under the care and protection of the Lord and his community. But as long as we think with a little more effort, I've got this, I've conquered it, we will relapse and relapse and relapse and relapse. So I can't emphasize this enough. There is a painful death facing you, staring you right in the face in this moment. Will I die to the fantasy of ever regaining control? And in this tender moment, there is some pointed questions. Are you willing to give up your fantasy of regaining control? Are you willing to accept that you have a spiritually fatal condition and desperately need an outside intervention of a love and a power way beyond anything you can produce and perform? Once you hit bottom and admit powerlessness, that's when the grace and authority and power of Christ move in, and not before. God will never reinforce the control thing inside of you. He will not help you regain control. He is an enemy of you being in control apart from him. Understand that. You will never be able to manipulate or bribe God or work a formula to get him to help you on this unholy mission of gaining control and saying, I did it. That has to just die. And it's painful, painful, painful. Don't hear me sugarcoating this. It is agony. It's like a crucifixion to die to that dream of being normal like other people and regaining control. Now you're going to hear something even more surprising. Jesus in the Gospels, in talking about sexual sin with his disciples, said it is so bad, its consequences are so grave. If you're touching women, if your hand is the problem, it's better to cut it off and enter into heaven with one arm than go to hell with both hands. And if your eye is, looking at women and, that's the gateway of, your sexual sin and fantasies and all that, better to pluck out your eye and enter heaven with one eye than go to hell with both of them. What Jesus is really saying is we will need to take drastic action if we're serious about dealing with our issue. Drastic action. For an example, my humble observation is these devices, these things, Yeah. It's almost like you're not a person unless you don't carry one. Well, for some of us, for many of us, because that's the primary gateway and accessibility point of pornographic images, you may not be able to safely own a smartphone ever again. You might have to have a dumb phone, a flip phone, the texts, calls, and that's it. Because you're perpetually weak and it's just too easy and too many things, images and things coming in that phone, and it is a stumbling block. It would be better to enter heaven without a smartphone than go to hell with one in your pocket. If I was using Jesus's shocking language of taking drastic actions. But there's a serious point. Are you willing, are you even open to considering taking drastic, lifelong actions where other people can have that and they're fine, but it's poison for you and it's gone? It's out. They can have it, but you can't. And that's okay. So, are you willing to give up control? And secondly, are you willing to take the drastic actions that are necessary for you to be safe? We'll see you next time. That's a lot to process. Take your time.